Hi, this is Geek from the Geek for All show. What you're about to watch is uncensored, unscripted, and possibly unethical. We hope you enjoy the Unofficial Stoned Sesh. What up?
Yo.
We're back, Geekmeister, Professor Weirdfuck. We were gonna be doing some looking into some actual comic stories and stuff, and then something big happened. DC made an announcement of a pretty epic scale. It's not a reboot, but they're doing a refocusing, and some new number ones are going to be coming out. It's called Rebirth.
The Rebirth.
The Rebirth. I mean, if you're into comic books at all, you probably have heard about this by this point already. But just in case that you haven't, essentially they're taking what's going down in the New 52, and they're just sort of continuing that, but refocusing and adding some new characters, getting rid of some lines that didn't work. And I think, when they say rebirth, they're doing that thing where officially most of everything has happened, but they're going to pick a couple of select things to decanonize, is what it sounded like, more or less.
Yeah.
That's the thing,
it's a little confusing.
They were a little vague, honestly. To be perfectly honest, some people were saying, "Oh my God, they gave so much information." Well, to a certain extent, they gave a lot of details and everything, but there's still a bit of confusion going on as to exactly what's happening, because we still got some players hanging around from Earth 2 who are getting storylines and stuff.
Yeah.
And the New 52 was kind of a weird thing in and of itself, being that, it was that continuation of the stacked universes. Anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, there was, after Infinity Crisis, this attempt to, Infinity Crisis was caused by an attempt to set right the events from Infinite Crisis on Earth, which was something that was done back in the 80s, just before, major plot points. For those of you who are familiar with Batman, right before the Killing Joke plot point would come out, this was an event that took place. And it was like a big cataclysmic multi-universe event. They did a second one in the early 2000s, another big cataclysmic event that was caused by somebody trying to correct the things that had happened in the first one. And by the end of it all you had was Earth 1, which is the mainstream line, which is basically the universe that has more or less existed since the Silver Age, but it's really just Silver Age origin stories, and then events from the Bronze Age up into the 52, essentially, because the 52 kind of rewrote most of what happened, in the 90s and stuff like that, or at least, changed it quite a bit. Obviously, Batgirl, for instance, was not... it's actually kind of unclear. I've read a few of her comics, and they seemed kind of vague on that. Maybe I just didn't read enough of them to get the full picture on that. Totally possible. I don't keep up with absolutely everything. But essentially, her time as Oracle was at least shortened greatly.
Yeah.
She actually recovered
she was
from
paralyzed and then eventually recovered.
Yeah. That's the whole thing about it.
It's kind of weird with the whole Oracle thing.
But anyway,
I don't know what they're trying.
We go into that in a second, but the point is that during the New 52, the biggest plot point of all is that essentially, they're rewriting what happened, in the 90s and stuff, and they're doing it with 52 universes. As far as I can tell, I haven't seen that stated anywhere, but everything that I was reading basically alluded to the fact, because right after the last Infinity Crisis, there was Earth 1, but then there were 51 other dimensions that popped up because of it, that were all basically carbon copies. And then after one more event, they became carbon copies with minor exceptions and stuff. And then you come out with the New 52. So I'm led to believe that means that every issue is a universe unto itself. And they're really, I think, kind of expanding on that a little bit in these ones, where you're getting some really crazy stuff. They announced that Batgirl comics are going to be taking place where Barbara Gordon is hitchhiking, or not hitchhiking, but just hiking through backpacking through Asia. But at the same same time, there's a comic taking place where she's back in the United States with the Birds of Prey as like kind of like the leader of the squad. So you got weird things like that going on, and they're continuing that, and I think they're kind of like going further into that and kind of like really drawing some lines between the universe a little bit on those type of situations. But they also are going into a lot of like legacy characters, and this is where I personally got some like questions about whether this was like the right move or not. But their basic mission statement is, we're going to give you more of Robin stuff, and we're going to give you more super people, and we're going to give you more Lantern Corps people, and they didn't have a single new comic book character, really. They had continuations and legacy.
They do keep talking about one character. It might be a new character, but I'm not sure if it's a new character or a old character.
Old character returning in some fashion.
But on the cover of the Rebirth special, there's this hand reaching out in this light shrouded hand.
Yeah.
And they're all reaching up to it. How they kept talking, how the writers kept talking about it at the when they announced it, was like, I'm not telling you who the hand is. It could be, it could be anyone. We'll find out.
Yeah, they were, they kept a lot of things quiet for sure. They definitely wanted to see us surprises. And again, the interesting thing about this is it's not a reboot; it's continuation. All of the comics that like were of the same title in the New 52 that are starting at #1, they're still a continuation of that story, which again feels weird. I keep questioning the logic of putting a comic at 1 when there's so much source material to have to rely back on to fully grasp the whole image. And that's what Marvel may draw some kind of like silly lines and stuff between their universes, but they're pretty concrete about it at the very least. And they're like very, very decisive and let fans know like, okay, this is when this universe ends and this stops here, and that like if there's any confusion, they kind of answer their fans on that pretty well. Like I know like way more, it's way easier to find stuff, frankly, about the separation of universes between Marvel than it is in DC. DC's kind of a little bit like, they want to say that everything's canon, but they won't discuss like what, like, okay, like, so fine, but what's the main universe's canon? Like, you kind of have to like almost dig for it yourself. Which is, again, like to try to get the full grasp of like what's going on here. You certainly are dependent on a lot of these ones, like knowing something, not necessarily crucially, but knowing some things about the characters ahead of time now for a lot of these characters setting forward and everything. Which I guess, considering that they're going with the legacy concept, is what they're aiming for.
Yeah.
But they talk about, which is weird, because for me, they talk about the fact that they want new fans and stuff, and yet their whole move is to like kind of just keep serving up some more of the same, it felt like. That's one of the things. I'm glad that they're taking the time to refocus, and they definitely were, while they did sort of their PC dance around it, they kind of came clean on we did some weird shit in New 52 that was just like, I don't know, there were some late nights,
well, it also seemed like that they're shrinking down the amount of series that they're making.
Yes, and drastically, and they are making it cheaper. So in that way, they are actually definitely trying to hook more people in. But they're trying to hook more people in on heroes that have been like around for a while, and I feel like that's kind of like a weird way to go about it. Like like I understand keeping your staples. Don't get me wrong, but I'd really like to see, both from DC and Marvel, quite frankly, I'd like to see some, like, new, fresh heroes.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about, we really need some new superheroes.
We do.
And
don't get me wrong, like, I don't want to see Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman go everywhere. They're staples of DC. They absolutely should continue being staples of DC. I'm 100% on them being the flagship. I'm 100% on Marvel always doing Spider-Man comics and always doing X-Men comics.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm always okay with that kind of, if they're really flagship type of situations, keep keep it going, but like let's get to some new stuff. Let's like also develop new things alongside of them. Like let's develop new universes and play around with what's going on. We don't have to be held to what has already happened if you've got new characters to work with.
Yeah.
However, though, I will give DC some credit in their continual efforts to please the fans on expanding and doing more with Harley Quinn.
Oh yeah.
They actually the way they put it is that they're looking at Harley Quinn as a sort of fourth. I mean, I would probably figure they're looking at it as a sort of this in a sort of temporary sort of state, but they're looking at her, at least for the time being, as a fourth pillar of DC right now. Was literally the way that they phrased it, and it's pretty cool because she's a hero that came out of television series.
Yeah, she started off in the cartoon animated series and just as another character,
and she's super new. And they didn't announce it, but I'm hoping that maybe somebody mentioned Static Shock. Oh no, somebody that was there who had worked on Static Shock.
Yeah.
That was what they had mentioned. So no, Static Shock isn't. But I wish they would, because a lot of people actually do like Static Shock, and I would totally read new issues of Static Shock, I would think.
Oh yeah,
Static Shock was a really cool character, especially considering I don't know whether or not it's confirmed, but isn't Jaden Smith supposed to go ruin Static Shock in a movie in a couple of years or something?
Who talks about it? I heard rumors. I can't say that I know anything for a fact.
All right. But yeah, I mean, if they especially if they wind up doing something like that. Although I really don't want it to be Jaden Smith.
Yeah,
I really don't. He doesn't have to be in everything. There are more young black actors. They exist.
Funny.
It's
just the go-to.
Yeah, but so that announcement was made. We felt like we definitely wanted to at least touch on that, and something else popped up that made me want to discuss more copyright infringement things. I was in the warehouse after we recorded last time, and I ran across this image from a Marvel Zombies graphic novel, like one of the volumes in the series, and it looks like a zombified Superman and Batman are fucking standing on this Marvel cover. I'm like, what is going on here? And there's a guy over there, my buddy Tony, and I'm like, hey Tony, what's going on? He's like, oh, it's Squadron Supreme. All right, what the hell is Squadron Supreme? A blatant ripoff of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, in the Flash, and basically of the Justice League. I'm like, really? So we look this shit up, and it's fucking hysterical, dude. It's exactly it. It's like all of them. They get their powers in different ways and shit, and they're way more fucked up and kind of evil-ish in certain ways.
Yeah.
In comparison to the Justice League.
Yeah.
But still, they are total. It's totally Hyperion Man or whatever. I think it's just Hyperion is totally Superman. You got Nighthawk, totally Batman. 100%.
That Prism dude.
Yeah. Green Lantern.
He has a powerful prism that gives him special abilities.
Yeah,
very similar to Green Lantern.
It was ridiculous. So we wanted to check out some more things, and I found this really interesting tidbit that I think a lot of people actually do know. This has been brought up before, but I wanted to discuss it because I think it's just cool. Is that X-Men may have been a ripoff.
Oh yeah.
Of something called Doom Patrol from DC. The premise of Doom Patrol from DC is a bunch of youngsters who have powers that make them misfits, who are led by a charismatic, very intelligent, older gentleman in a wheelchair.
Sound familiar?
Sound familiar? Because it sounds very, very familiar to me. And the interesting thing about this is that this debuted 3 months before X-Men did, which is crazy. So, a lot of people dismiss it as, you know, like, well, no, there's no way. 3 months is enough time to like get a comic book written and, you know, done, especially back then and everything. The technology wasn't there. But actually, it's an interesting thing. Because of the fact that technology wasn't there, you also have to look at a lot of people, and this is still true, the writers and illustrators of Marvel and DC switch back and forth all the fucking time. Frank Miller has worked on probably as much Marvel as he has DC at this point in his career. And then he is by no means an exception to that rule. These comic book writers and illustrators illustrate and write comic books for whatever publisher wants to let them use their licensed character. That's kind of the way that the industry really works, essentially. You know, the publisher goes, all right, what do we want to do with these characters? Let's find the people who can take them in the right direction based on their other work, regardless of what work that was. And so at that time, it would have been really easy to, even on like an accidental kind of level, sort of like overhear something or be inspired by like, you know, something like kind of similar that happens or whatever, or just straight up having the time to like steal a concept if somebody's been talking about it before like all the pictures are finished. So it's definitely very possible that it's hard to say for sure that Marvel ripped off DC. But again, when you see something like Squadron Supreme, which of course might have been, that was a couple of years later, so who knows, that could have just been a sarcastic response to claims of, like, you know, stealing property and stuff like that. Like, stealing property? You want to see stealing property? Here's stealing property, motherfucker. That's kind of what Squadron Supreme feels like. And actually, with as much that was going on, because crazy thing is that Doomsday Patrol has been, or I'm sorry, Doom Patrol has been accused in the past of being at least partially a ripoff of the Fantastic Four premise. This one's a way looser argument, but there are a couple of characters with similar power sets, and it is like, you know, that kind of like, let's team up and be kind of like a family of super people together and stuff. You know, there wasn't like some kind of officially sanctioned league. It had a little bit more of like, and then that's the thing, like, X-Men definitely has got like that family vibe to it, for sure. It like that be like, you know, Fantastic Four is the first like superhero family, but, and even if you count X-Men, but I mean, X-Men still kind of has that vibe, you know what I mean? Like, it's still definitely got that kind of like, you know, Xavier's the dad, and like all those students are his kids, and,
right?
You know, so you know, it's easy to see like where that comparison kind of comes into play. And one of the characters in particular who has a power that might be like a stealing type of thing is that there's somebody in Doom Patrol who's stretchy. There is a woman who can stretch herself and stuff, like Mr. Fantastic. Or Plastic Man, who is a Golden Age and Silver Age comic character from DC. Yep. So here's the crazy thing. So what we are saying here is that, and again, this is not substantiated, this is all totally hypothetical, but allegedly, you could say that X-Men is the revenge of a revenge of a revenge. Yep. Like, it's a revenge 3 times removed. Like, that, to me, is fucking hysterical. It's you know, it's really interesting though to see the fact though that like, despite all of these like kind of like back and forths and stuff, the fact that like the same illustrators and, you know, writers are working like on both sets, like, or trading back and forth all the time, even to this day, there's sort of a weird like. And there's never been much of there's been very, very few lawsuits that have ever actually come up over it. And there's been lots of, like, cases where you probably could have, like, thrown a lawsuit out there if you wanted to.
There's so many different Marvel heroes and DC heroes that are just way too similar.
Yeah. Like, you know, and at the end of the day, part of that, too, is that there's sort of, like, a limited set of, like, powers, like, kind of, that have been substantiated in the universe. And, you know, until somebody starts thinking of, like, you know, we may have run out of superpowers ultimately at this point, unless we start thinking of that I can think of. Like, I don't know. I think we've probably seen most superpowers done. Like, I can't think of like a type of power that hasn't been demonstrated, like in not only in a comic book, but probably somewhere in Marvel and DC. Yeah, between the two of them somewhere. So, you know, you wind up seeing, like, a lot of characters and stuff. But I think the important thing and the cool thing to see about this is how different the vibe, like, despite that there's, like, some kind of, like, blatant copyright stuff going on, there seems to be still, like, this camaraderie between everybody, and there's, like, enough of a difference that, like even, like, in, like we were saying before with the Squadron Supreme, they're way darker and edgier. Even though they're supposed to kind of be, like, they're way, there's kind of, like, this, you know, kind of, like, vibe of, like, oh, shit, you guys are kind of cutthroat and willing to do some fucked up things to, like, have order the way you see it.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of cool. And, I mean, that's, you know, very true also, I would say, of Doom Patrol as well, especially if I was looking into it a little bit. Doom Patrol, apparently, like, toward the end, you discover that, like, the Professor X-type character actually somehow caused all of the accidents that made all of the super kids into, like, superpowered beings and stuff.
Oh,
because
yeah.
he was, like, testing some crazy theory about, like, tragedy creating greatness.
What the fuck? Do they kill him?
I don't know. I was skimming a lot of different things. Like, I was looking over most of this. Like, that video dropped a couple of days ago that the DC did. That we're talking about. If you look up DC Rebirth, it'll be like the first video that pops up on YouTube if you're curious to see what we were talking about with that. Really, really easy to find. And in regards to everything else that we were saying with, like, the copyright stuff, you know, I think that we may continue to look into other, like, examples and compare superheroes in the future.
Yeah.
But as for next week, we are hopefully going to be we just see if we might still just do the 2 first issues and go from there on it. But there is this comic series that we found about Batman and Joker in Europe.
Yep, Batman Europa.
Batman Europa, and it apparently had a really limited release, I guess.
I don't know, because what happened, I went to the comic book store, like, about a month or so ago, and I found it on the shelves, and I could only find 1 and 2. Got 1 and 2. Then, a couple days ago, I went to another comic book store, the one I typically frequent at, and they only had, like, 1 and 2, or the whole book of it. But I already had the first 2 issues. I like having the whole issues if I started doing that. And the guy was saying, yeah, we don't really carry it because I think they're just about out of print. So...
Wow, okay. But I mean, it's in graphic novel form, so the story is at least around.
Yeah,
but,
the
like,
story is around.
But yeah, so I think it's definitely, like, a lesser known story, certainly, and it's really interesting. Essentially, it's you know, it features the Joker, you know, poisoning Batman, kind of the way that he does in the second Arkham video game a little bit.
It wasn't Joker that...
Oh, it isn't Joker who poisoned?
No, Joker doesn't poison him. Joker and Batman just both are poisoned with the same virus.
Oh, sorry, misunderstood.
And they have to work together. They're working together to find the cure throughout getting dragged along all of Europe.
Okay.
So they don't die.
Got it. But yeah, I've only been able to read a couple of panels. He just lent them to me tonight, basically, and... But I'm going to be reading those. We're going to try to get through that. We'll maybe at least do the first half and maybe do some other comic that we managed to pick up. But we're going to try to do a comic review next time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so...
Talk a lot about Batman.
Yeah, talk a lot about Batman. And hopefully we're going to try to get off Batman because we've been on Batman a lot recently. But we couldn't help it, you know? Like, a lot of Batman, between Batman versus Superman and now this Rebirth that has, you know, a lot of Batman-oriented stuff going on in it. Batman's huge right now, so, you know, and we're not going to be the only ones doing that. So we're going to try to get off Batman, but just before that next week, one more Batman. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay good. Peace out.